All right, Jebediah tried to say, "What are you nerding out about?" And I'll go first. A regular on this show is AMC Screen Unseen. If you're unfamiliar for what Screen Unseen is, it is basically a sneak preview of a movie 1 to 2 weeks ahead of time that you just don't know what it is. All you know is the rating of the movie and the average runtime. So they've gotten really smart about that because people start figuring out, oh, that runtime matches this movie. So they make it within a range for the runtime. And sometimes you get okay movies. Sometimes you get fantastic movies.
And
Joe,
a lot of them end up being from film festivals. So
true, a lot of it is Sundance Film Festival. I've seen a lot of interesting indie films I probably wouldn't have seen otherwise, and I really loved them. But Joe, I'll go ahead and give you a hint. It's not a film festival movie. Take a guess at what this Monday's Screen Unseen was.
Friday the 13th.
All right, moving on. So we're watching the previews, and I think they're interesting, like fun, but I can tell you they're not good. There's like a preview for a movie called Werewolf, and it's cheesy as it sounds. Y2K, which is a comedy horror take on Y2K. If the machines actually came alive and started killing people, these are bad previews. So my wife was getting very wary about what film are we going to be watching with all these bad previews.
Well, because a lot of times they try to have them to be tonally similar.
Yeah. Well, it's similar in the violence and the blood because we got to see Gladiator II.
Oh, okay.
On Monday night, and it's fantastic. If you liked Gladiator 1, I think you'll love Gladiator 2. So that's where we're going to leave it. It was just fantastic. Ridley Scott knows how to shoot a movie, so it's brilliantly framed and it's beautiful. I thought the acting was great. I really enjoyed Gladiator. So this
how was the storyline? Was it okay?
Yeah, it fit the vibe of the first one. It's 16 years later, which I didn't check to see when Gladiator was released. So it's perhaps actually 16 in the movie. It's 16 years later. So I'm not sure if it's real time.
Got it.
Then the other thing I did is I trolled two friends of mine this week, Joe.
Okay.
I went and re-downloaded Pokemon Go not podcast, that's us. Pokemon Go, signed in, opened and sent a gift to Phil and to John, and immediately deleted the app just to mess with it. Because Thomas, sorry, I got really bad about returning gifts when we did the show. We quit the show well over a year ago, and we still get grief from some of the fans like, he still hadn't opened my gift. So now, John and Phil, that clock resets, and I hope it drives you crazy. You're welcome. Now, one of the things that Thomas was telling us he got into, which I've always been interested in, I actually had the book, The Art of Peace, which to my understanding was written by the founder of Jiu Jitsu. You're really nerding out about Jiu Jitsu right now.
Yeah, so I've been training for off and on since I was about 17, and there's so many details, and every time I feel like I got into another level, there's always somebody that beats me. There's always somebody better. It's the never ending journey. And so it's a sport that challenges me mentally, physically, spiritually. And it takes a lot of, like, if I don't have that spirit of nerding out and enjoying it, and I just take it too seriously, it doesn't make it fun. So when I'm in that space of looking at the details and nerding out, like, okay, I could pull the lapel here and wrap it over his shoulder and then grab this, that would be a fun position. That's when it's a lot of fun. And so, and I've been in that space where I just pushing and grinding and I'm not being playful. And so that's why I really appreciate you guys' energy tonight, because it kind of it's bringing me back to a little bit more of a space of being a kid.
You know what? That is a little behind baseball. One of the things that podcasters or creators tend to talk about behind the scenes, like, what's your demographic? What's your audience look like? And it's hard to explain. So I always tell why we got into this show, because we can appeal to young people, but we're really doing it for Joe and myself, because we are grown kids, and not in that negative way that the world tries to say is like, oh, you never grow. It's like you shouldn't get rid of your fun. Have fun.
Yeah.
And I love to hear that jiu-jitsu is not just a workout for you. It's not just a martial art. It is your fun.
Yeah. I tell my son, he's like, you know, when I step down onto the mat, or I have a rule. One of my values, like some people have value of like integrity or honor. Like one of my values is 17. Every day I want to do something that makes me feel like I'm 17 years old.
Ah, wow. All right.
Yeah. So jiu-jitsu is one of those things. It could be playing a video game, you know, like I don't do that very often. But like lately, it's starting to get dark. Like we love to be real active as a family, like go and explore things. But now here, you know, it's dark now at 5 o'clock. It's yes, we can still go to the park, but the amount of time we're there is not as much. So, you know, it's like if there's a time of year that I pull out the old PlayStation 2, it's this time of year, like between now and Christmas, to just have a few fun rounds of Mortal Kombat or, you know, Madden or whatever it might be.
Okay.
Yeah, man.
Now we've got a comment here from Random Kid. He wants to know if you do competitive or casual jiu-jitsu. Or
I
both.
would consider I consider myself competitive. I compete about 3 times a year. In 2023, I competed 4 times, and this year I've competed twice. Right. I did last year compete in the world championships for Nogi, and I lost in the first round, but it was still same thing, like fun experience as a kid. Like I get to compete in the world championships. Like I've got to be able to go there if I'm going to have a chance to win a world championship. So why not have, just writing a fun story. And that's what it's about for me, is just keeping it fun. So, but that said, I think that to be a strong player in jiu-jitsu, you've got to compete a few times a year because it forces you to tighten up your game. If you have some wins, you understand what is working. You have some losses, it's really clear what you need to change and adjust. And if it's just casual, like, yes, you'll get better. I just think it's so much faster if you're willing to step into the discomfort of competing in front of people.
So I have a quick, go ahead, Joe.
I was just going to say, I have a friend who is a former UFC fighter, and I could be misremembering, but I'm pretty sure he said that jiu-jitsu was one of the best foundations for an MMA fighter. And so that's just random comment, but man, you're talking about that made me think of that. So
absolutely. Yeah. I don't do any more full contact. I did when I was younger. When I was in college, I did a few fights. But it's definitely helpful because I wrestled a few years, but like having that edge on the ground where you're like, okay, if we get close together and we end up on the ground, if you have the edge in jiu-jitsu, that's where you want to have the fight. So it's definitely an advantage.
There you go.
You use it for fun now. Is that what made you choose jiu-jitsu over all the other martial arts or other things you can do?
I do like striking. It's just like I started to get headaches a lot. And so I was like, okay, I could continue this. And I went to school to be a teacher and exercise science background. And then like I did all this work to develop my brain. It doesn't make sense to continue to get punched in the face. So what I love about jiu-jitsu is we could play really hard and compete. And if you do it correctly, you're not going to take damage. Like there's still injuries that happen, but like if you're boxing the way that you're supposed to box, you're going to take damage. Like even if you have headgear and all that, right? But if you're doing jiu-jitsu well, there's going to be very little damage that you're going to take, and you could still go hard. So that's something I really appreciate it. The other thing is that there are the competitions around the area, and the complexity of it. There's always another level.
That's amazing.
There's so many ways to win, right? In wrestling, you put somebody on the back. That's the one way you can win. In jiu-jitsu, you can attack their neck, their arm, their wrist, their knee, their ankle, their back, their calf, whatever. Like you just need to create a dangerous situation for them, and you've taken care of business.
What is the win scenario in jiu-jitsu? I don't actually know.
So there are two primary philosophies in jiu-jitsu competition. One is called a submission only tournament. And those you have to submit your opponent or it's a tie. So it's a lot like soccer, where if you get a draw, you get 1 point. If you get a win, you get 3 points in the tournament. And those are fun because they're typically round robin and you get a few more matches when you do the sub onlys. And I also think it's a different style of jiu-jitsu because the points don't matter. So if you get to a good, like this last tournament that I did in October, I got to a position where I scored a takedown. I took the guy down and I was able to hold him there on his back for the rest of the match. And so I was like, well, I could take a risk and go for a submission, but he could also get out and get on top and end up getting ahead of me on points. So I made the decision to just stay there and not take as big a risk and take the win. But in a sub only tournament, I would have had to continue to work to get the submission. So sub only, you got to tap them out, whether that's a choke, armbar, straight ankle lock, depending on the level. So if I'm purple belt, as you move up, you get more options for submissions because they get, especially with the knee, they get more dangerous. They want to make sure people know when to tap and the dangers and risks involved. If somebody's going to putting on those submissions in a tournament, the points is different. So points, you get 2 points for a takedown, 3 points for passing guard, which probably doesn't mean much to you all. And then there are different positions that are identified as advantageous. So you get anywhere from 2 to 4 points for those if you establish those positions that are advantageous to you throughout the match. And so sometimes people score 20, 30 points in a match if they just flow from one position to the next.
Okay. So not too far removed from Greco-Roman wrestling where you can either win by pin or by points, depending on the format, obviously, like you said. Okay.
Yes.
I've always been interested in it. I've never researched it. And I just love it. It sounds as much as an art form as it is a fighting style.
Yes. Yes. Because even within it, there are so many different niches that you could be. You could be a footlock specialist. You could be somebody that's really good at taking the back. You could like the bent arm locks. Like you can take the match where you want to take it. So it's very much like, if I'm being honest, like wrestling compared to jiu-jitsu is like checkers and chess because there's just so many different places that you can be good and you could also be in danger with your opponent because you could get any part of your body could get exposed and that could end the match.
I could go on all night about that. So we have some time. So, Joe, what are you nerding out about?
Yeah, so this past weekend, Charles and I were at CONjuration. You know, anyone who's been listening to the podcast may have heard us mention that a time or two in the last several episodes. But it was a blast. Much smaller than Dragon Con, but we were expecting that going in. But what's nice about smaller format cons is you get to see people a bunch of times throughout the weekend and kind of get a feel for who they are, even if they don't talk to us, like that woman that was dressed up like the Purple Devil. But I intentionally signed up for a bunch of panels this go around. I got onto 6 panels, which isn't a ton, but it's a lot. It's the most I've ever done at a con.
It was good, man.
And it was a ton of fun. Even some of the panels where we had our last panel, for instance, we had one person in the audience, but it was a great conversation. Yeah. And you know, between the panelists and the woman in the audience also was getting in on it, and it was amazing. And yeah, our show went great. We saw people from our show throughout the weekend, and they told us how much they appreciated it. And yeah, it was a ton of fun. And that weekend also, Charles helped alleviate some of my battery issues with my cell phone. So my cell phone, it if it's not plugged in, it's dying. My cell phone. So Charles was like, "Hey, I've got this cell phone that's just been sitting in a drawer for the last year and a half. Do you want it?" And I'm like, "Yes, please." And so it's been great having that cell phone. Thank you, Charles, again.
And if anybody picked this up after CONjuration, thank you. We welcome you into the Fandom, and we'd love to hear from you. And the young lady who was the purple devil demon cosplay, quiet, but loved the energy, loved the cosplay. And my headcanon was, while she didn't really engage with the show, she's going to become our #1 fan and just show up at everything we ever do in that cosplay. And it's going to be amazing. So it was a blast. So cool, man. Did you buy anything?
I bought a few things. I bought one of Bob Magoo's books, which he's been on the show a couple of times. I bought one of the books from Ben Meeks, which
That's right, yeah.
we're talking. He's obviously another author since I bought one of his books, but we're talking to him about coming on as a guest as well. And then I bought 4 pins. And the pins were custom art of ghosts dressed up as Marvel characters. And so I bought those 4 pins, and I gave one to each of my kids as well as one to my wife. And speaking of my wife, she pops in. The kids love the pins. Yeah, so they put the pins on backpacks and laptop bags and things like that. And so they're loving that. So yeah, that's what you bought a few things as well while you were there, right?
Yeah, I bought a Christmas present for my executive administrator, and then I bought one of Bob's books for myself. So yeah, that was really about it. I did bid to win some other Harry Potter stuff for some other friends of mine, but I didn't make it. But all the donations that were bid went to the hurricane relief. So
Amazing.
really cool. So yeah, I mean, I usually don't get in on those things. But like, yeah, if it goes to relief and maybe I win, maybe I don't, it helps somebody out. So that was cool.